Today, the Hershey Corridor is the site of China's G30 highway in Gansu province. Standing on this long and lonely stretch of motorway today, with cars zipping along it through the desert, it's hard to imagine that this was once a major battlefield in a war for the very existence of the Chinese state. When the Han dynasty came into possession of the newly united China in the year 206 BC, it inherited from the Qin not just the young empire, but also the empire's problems. Easily the most pressing problem was the constant looming threat of China's fearsome neighbors to the north. They lived nomadic lifestyles, traveling on horseback in vast populations, moving from grazing land to grazing land, and living without the need for agriculture. These nomadic groups of horse riders had become a military threat to the settled societies of the Chinese plains. They joined forces under the rule of a single ruler who took the title of Shan Yu. Taken together, the vast wastes that the Xiongnu ruled over were the largest empire in terms of landmass on Earth at the time. The kingdoms that bordered the lands of the Xiongnu were under constant threat of raids and invasions. For the first time, the words of the pro-war faction at court resonated with the young ruler. Wu decided on a bold and aggressive new strategy. The Han Empire would confront the Xiongnu head-on. The Hershey Corridor was the battlefront of the bitter and grinding war for the north. It's clear that the settled armies of the Chinese, despite all their technological advantages, found these nomadic armies incredibly difficult to fight. And so, as they pushed the Xiongnu back along the Hershey Corridor, the Han did what they did best. They built walls. The Han extended the existing segments of their Great Wall so that it now ran the whole length of the corridor, creating a fortified highway between the wall and the mountains, guarded by garrisoned forts. The Han-era walls were rough and ready constructions made of rammed earth. They were built using frames of rose willow and layers of rushes filled with desert clay and gravel, packed together and left to dry in the sun. But they were immensely effective. These walls have also withstood over 2,000 years of erosion in the elements of the Gobi Desert, and many of them still stand, magnificent against the barren desert. Every 5 kilometers along the wall, a beacon tower stood, usually about 7 meters high. If enemy troops were sighted, the men in the beacon towers would light a fire designed to produce smoke by day or light by night. This cry for help would be passed on in both directions along the wall, and a Han cavalry army would soon be dispatched to meet the threat. These walls completely neutralized the Xiongnu's fast mobile tactics and restricted their ability to move around the landscape. This final move by the Han slowly choked the life from the Xiongnu war machine. In the early decades of the 1st century BC, the Xiongnu truly began to fall apart. Former members declared independence and joined the Han in carving up its territories. By 60 BC, they had split into 5 groups that engaged in a series of suicidal civil wars. In 53 BC, the Shan Yu sent his son to China as a hostage, and 2 years later, he went in person to the Chinese court to deliver his surrender. It had taken more than 80 years, but the war against the Xiongnu had been a remarkable success.